Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion. And on this short week, the holiday week, and on this Friday morning, really interesting trade already. Just 30 minutes into the trading session, and it's already getting wild. But if we look back to yesterday, what really stood out was the markets were moving around a little bit, and obviously following up onto Wednesday. Just an interesting move, and a lot of that move really coming late in the trading session. As a matter of fact, you look over and you lose 300 points in the final hour in the Dow. Dow finished down over 400 points yesterday. That was a pretty swift move. And along with that, the S&P had a pretty significant drop too. Dropped about 50 points in that final hour, finishing down 60. NASDAQ, even worse, down 170 points, finished down 221 points. That final hour really just getting hit across all the major indices, and that was something that really stood out. However, volatility. You look over at the volatility index, you aren't seeing the kind of spikes that you normally would see under that sort of selling pressure. As a matter of fact, you look over at the VIX, yes, it closed near the highs of the day, but that's right around 30. So not an explosive fear move from the markets, but a lot of what looked to be folks really kind of rolling out many of these option positions that had been put on that were very bullish, and maybe taking some of that off. That certainly could have been a contributing factor in terms of that big swift move. And we had some monstrous triple Q put buying later into the afternoon as well. So that was something that stood out. 31 million contracts yesterday. Apple traded 2.5 million of that 31. Tesla finished up with about 1.6 million. And then you had Facebook with just over 500,000 contracts trading there as well. So a lot of different things going on within the markets. And when you look deep beneath, you see what was really dragging on the markets. It was the NASDAQ names. But obviously, when you look at some of those names, they're also in the Dow and, of course, in the S&P 500. But Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, AMD, NVIDIA, you get a little bit of a pressure on all of those various names, you are going to drag markets a lot lower. And add to that, the energy names, which absolutely are getting crushed once again. You look at the OIH, and those are much more of the beta names, and I realize it's the service names. However, those are more on the beta side of things. The XLE down about a little over 3.5% as well. Chevron down over 2%. But take a look at some of these names and some of the performance that you saw yesterday. EOG, Apache, Devon, Halliburton, Hess, Concho, Diamondback. You get the idea. These names all hammered to the downside, all off more than 5%. 5% or more in all of those names. And there were other names that I could have read off as well, but that gives you a little bit of a flavor for energy, yes. The technology names, yes. Matter of fact, technology finished the day down about 2.5%. If you look over at the XLK, healthcare down about 1.5%, and financials, which have been kind of all over the place, finished down as well, about 1.5%. We've had days where the financials were trying to show a little bit of strength, maybe a little bit of a rotation, but just not able to hold on to that. As a matter of fact, take a look, and I use this as the barometer each and every day, JP Morgan. And the reason I do is this is a stock that has really had trouble getting up and over 100 and sustaining the move over $100 a share. So that's something that we've been watching closely. Now, there have been significant moves of late where we've had days where we've looked over and suddenly you see a name like JP Morgan trading at 104, 105, maybe even as high as 107, only to return back a couple of days later back towards 100 or even below. So that's been sort of the measuring stick for me on a lot of these financials, is just taking a look at a couple of the names and where they are and are they able to break out. We talk about the XLF all the time, and the XLF, it seems like that number's that 25 number. It seems like it's been floating around there, both higher and lower, but that seems to be the number where that seems to be holding as well when you're looking at the major index itself. So a lot of different things going on, but a lot of different pressure, and obviously a pretty widespread move in terms of that push to the downside, especially in that final hour. Now, after that, however, Peloton, wow. You know, the stay-at-home stocks have such a great advantage, this being one of them, of course. And as people have stayed at home, going away from being in gyms, which is one of the higher areas in terms of, you know, where you do not probably want to be oftentimes, just because of what all goes on there and all the transferring, and people are worried about touching and the breathing and all the rest of those things, especially while you're working out. So Peloton's been in a great position. Well, their new highs, it actually got over 98. As a matter of fact, subscriber numbers up well over 100%. Sales were up 170%. So they really have positioned themselves very, very rapidly into something where you're pulling forward. And what I mean by that is they did not expect to start really be profitable until sometime maybe out a year or two. Well, they actually put up an incredible quarter this past quarter, and they are well on their way at this point in time. And so a lot of those folks who have been involved with Peloton, very, very happy about what's going on. Now, you started off today with a pretty decent start. You look at the S&P, it was up about 19 points in the pre-market. The Dow was over 100 points. You look over at the NASDAQ, it was up over 60 points early on. But then you get into the opening of the day, and suddenly a shift comes once again in that selling pressure. It's why those indications are great, but they don't really tell the full story till we really get everybody involved and we have that opening bell. So you finish with the opening bell, and by the time that bell was done ringing, the S&P was only up about 12. The industrials actually was holding on pretty well. That was up about 90. NASDAQ was up about 50. NASDAQ actually dipped in the first 30 minutes into the red, and then it's come out of that. It's been moving all around. Matter of fact, I'll take a quick look over there. It's still shifting around. By the way, Peloton, I'm just looking over at the TV now. Peloton was 98 last night. Today, it's trading right in the 90s. So it certainly has pulled back off of that spike right after the earnings and some of those numbers and all the rest of it. But this is a name that has been absolutely impressive, and those numbers, again, really, really impressive. So now as we get a little bit deeper into the day, the Dow, now it's starting to perform pretty well, up about 120. NASDAQ, only up 9 points right now, with the S&P up 10 points. So you could see where that pressure's coming once again. The NASDAQ names, and that's oftentimes we look at the tech, we look at semiconductors, we look at all of that, and that's the contributing factors to what's really pulling on that. Maybe even toss in a couple of biotech names here and there. But there is some strengths, and obviously there's some of the weaknesses. Now, early on, we did see the SMH and many of the chip names actually performed pretty nice. We had NVIDIA, NXPI, Micron, Applied Materials, Intel, all in the positive, all in the green. As a matter of fact, the SMH was up about 1.5%. One of the names in the tech side of things that really started off the day with a bang, Oracle. You look at some of those numbers, the earnings growth was about 16%. Some of the revenue growth is well up about 2%. The giddiness of the CEO in terms of where Oracle is right now certainly reflected as well. And that stock with a pretty nice move to the upside early on, over 5% move. It's pulled back a little bit as well, very similar to what we're seeing in Peloton right now. But so that was up close to 6%. You look at Netflix up 2.5% or so. Zoom up about 3.5%. Add in Nike, Amgen, and Caterpillar and some of these Dow names, and you can understand why the Dow's up triple digits right now. Can we hold on? That's really the big question that everybody's oftentimes wanting to ask, because it's been such an all in or all out type of a market that we continue to look at each and every day, and you're trying to scratch your head and trying to figure this thing out. Doesn't make it any easier. I will tell you this. Volatility index does sort of give you some of the insight into the nervousness of the markets as well as the actual movement. We've been getting that movement. We've certainly, when you look at the movement intraday, we are certainly living up to where the volatility index is. If you're at a 32, that's about a 2% move. Well, we're seeing some pretty substantial moves on a daily basis that justifies why we are near those levels. As a matter of fact, right now, the last I looked, I saw the volatility index trading right around 28. And so after closing yesterday, right around 30, which was near the highs of the day after that sell-off, here we are at 28 with the markets sort of moving a little bit more and more to the upside. Now the NASDAQ's up about 41. I'm looking at the Dow up about 150 points. So there is some movement, and every moment you can see the markets can shift either to the upside or the downside. The downside really been mostly towards the NASDAQ in terms of those tech names that have been under pressure. But right now, starting to see a little bit of a lift, which is nice to see. By the way, unusual option activity. I'll be giving you all kinds of unusual option activity when I'm on the halftime report today, which I will be on with Scott Wapner and the entire gang. That should be pretty fun, noontime, so look forward to that. Before that, I'm going to give you guys your own unusual option activity, and that's going to be in Micron Technology, MU. So we had a buyer right out of the gate early on within the first 15 minutes or so of the trading day. 5,200 of the September 47 calls. These are going out 1 week, because here we are, believe it or not, September 11th, and we all remember that date. It's something that's ingrained in my head forever. The second I hear that, I have a certain sadness that comes to me, obviously, because of the circumstances, 2001, and being on the trading floors myself, and then looking at the Sears Tower and all the rest of that, and what might be the next targets and all of that type of thing. Just a a horrific, not just day, but even the follow-up for weeks and weeks and months, and all of the tragedy that comes with that whole thing. That being said, the expiration of these options will be next Friday, so the third Friday, normal expiration, 47 calls. They bought them for about 40 to 70 cents. Stock was trading 46. So these are just out of the money calls, dollar out of the money, and fairly inexpensive, although you only have 1 week. And we talk about this all the time. This has been the trend. The trend has been very short term for a very long time. This has been going on. This actually goes back to last year, but specifically, even more so, the time crunch has really come down even tighter this year, 2020, specifically as soon as we hit and we got into this pandemic. That suddenly everybody has a much, much shorter view of the markets in terms of where they think some of the participation is going to be and some of the movement's going to be. And obviously we see it each and every day. And those moves, that's why I have to remind you, discipline is everything. If you have discipline, if when you buy something, you know for good or bad where you're going to sell it, that will give you an advantage, because mentally, oftentimes people don't do that. If they don't have discipline, they suddenly lose what their vision is, and they lose all vision because they've got blinders on, because one specific thing is taking all of their attention, and you can't do that. So discipline is obviously something that's very, very important, and education. If you get that, you've got yourself an opportunity. Speaking of opportunities, last opportunity. If you want to, the Twin Cities Lyme Foundation, we have our gala. It's our third one. It's going to be virtual. If you go to twincitieslyme.org, go to the events page, and then click on the details and register, you can be a part of this as well. It's raising money so that people can go to a Lyme literate practitioner and they can get the properly diagnosed. It's so important. It also, we try to give people some awareness tips as well and all the rest of it. But the reality is trying to get people to a Lyme literate doctor so they can actually find out, do they have Lyme disease? Do they have any of the co-infections? All of that is very important. It's going to be 1 hour. It's going to be on Saturday night, 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. Saturday night, 7 to 8. We're not going to keep you all night long, just a little over an hour, maybe even right at an hour. That's our goal. And we've got entertainment. We've got live auction items. Those auction items are live right now. You can bid on some of those, including a Market Rebellion package and so many more. There's a Bonovia Winery package as well. So many different things. We got an Echelon bike. I mean, you name it, we've got it. We've got all kinds of different things. But we're just trying to raise money for that foundation, which, by the way, it is an expensive process, but it's something that we find to be so important with my wife, who suffered with Lyme disease for 16 years undiagnosed. And now she at least lives a much better life because she was diagnosed, and she's able to go through the protocol so that she can live a much better life than she was living, which was awful, bedridden, and all the rest of it. So please, if you have the opportunity, go to that Lyme, twincitieslyme.org, go to the events page, scroll down, go to the gala, and look at the details, and that'll bring you to the page where you can register. Really look forward to seeing you there. And folks, have a great day of trading. Have a great weekend and a safe weekend as well.